Story 1. The appeal to nature drives me nuts. It's often used as a base for esoteric nonsense, including essential oils, homeopathy, and anti-vaccine beliefs. Story 2. That being nervous causes asthma attacks. Typical television scenario. A socially awkward guy panics about something silly and reaches for his inhaler. Reliever inhalers make your heart beat faster. The last thing you need when you're already panicking. Also, asthma attacks are caused by things like allergies, dust, perfume, or smoke, not uncomfortable social situations. Story 3. That I'm single because I'm a loser or a coward. That isn't true. I'm single because I'm a greedy, selfish jerk who doesn't want to devote much time or money to others. Story 4. One common misconception I find frustrating is that intelligence is solely determined by academic success. Many people assume that if someone is not excelling in school, they are not smart, when in reality, intelligence can manifest in various ways. Creativity, emotional understanding, practical skills, and more. Everyone has unique strengths that are not always captured by traditional measures. Story 5. MRI technician here. Metal is not the only unsafe thing for magnetic resonance imaging. I don't care what your doctor told you about whatever device they implanted in your body. Quite frankly, they are not the expert when it comes to magnetic resonance imaging safety. We are. Additionally, every company has different policies. If I am asking you to do something, it's for a reason. Like remove your jewelry or change your clothes, or if I've asked you the same questions you've already been asked on the phone and by my technician aide, it is for your safety. I am operating a very dangerous machine that can definitely kill you, and I am responsible for your safety. Story 6. People with mental illness are often incorrectly labeled as insane or incoherent. Many individuals I know live with mental illness in a very ordinary way, and much of it stems from stress and a lack of effective coping skills. This is not the case for everyone, but they are usually quite clear-headed, even though their thoughts are filtered through personal pain, which can sometimes appear to be insane. Medication is intended to alleviate this pain and help them cope more responsibly. Even if someone is genuinely struggling, they still deserve a fundamental level of respect and the opportunity to demonstrate their ability to function. Instead of silencing them, their voices should be uplifted, regardless of their mental state, and they should receive support to express their perspectives. Story 7. I'm not shy. I just don't have much to say if I'm still trying to get a read on you, or if all you want to talk about is the weather when I can already clearly see that it is, in fact, raining. Wanting to listen instead of finding any opportunity to open my mouth isn't a mental disorder. Thank you, goodbye. Story 8. Australia wildlife is all trying to kill you from Americans. You guys have actual large predators like bears and wolves. The most we have is a few dangerous ocean life. Just don't go in the ocean. And snakes. Don't come in summer. You get antivenom for a spider bite, you can't antivenom your face back on. Story 9. That socializing is something introverts dislike. Unlike extroverts who seem to recharge from being among others, we merely need a day to recover from a night out. It seems like our phone's battery needs some time to recharge completely. Story 10. That chewing gum takes years to digest. Most of it is indigestible, so it actually doesn't get digested at all. It just passes through you, and the rest is absorbed. Story 11. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Story 12. That workers strike because they are greedy. In my experience, workers strike because of terrible working conditions and pay that has not kept up with the cost of inflation. Typically, the strike happens after a lot of negotiation because workers don't want to strike at all. Story 13. That certain kinds of women can't be victims of abuse. Not all of us are meek, staring at the floor, and have no self-confidence. It's just another reason not to believe women who are being hurt. Not all of us were pretending he would change and staying in the hope of that. Some of us were being held hostage with viable threats after trying to leave. Story 14. There is an increase in neurodivergence among the population. There is no data to prove that because you cannot compare a diagnosis today with a diagnosis that did not exist. People who are on the spectrum today were just called weird in the past. Story 15. Fat people are all about snacking, just constantly eating. And if they are not eating, it's because they have just been eating or are going somewhere else to eat. Story 16. The belief that people have diabetes because they eat excessive amounts of sugary foods is a misconception. The idea that eating sweet foods will give you diabetes is also incorrect. Diabetes is not a moral failing. If this were true, most of the global population would be diabetic, and no animals would be diabetic, yet cats, who are obligate carnivores, can also develop diabetes. There is much more to this serious and often life-limiting medical condition, which is often linked to genetics. Unfortunately, society still tends to laugh and poke fun at it as if it's a joke. Story 17. Autistic individuals lack empathy. In some cases, this is true, but mostly from what I've heard and in my own experience, it's closer to this. I can tell what you're feeling and I do care. I just don't have a clue how to respond, so it looks like I don't have empathy. Story 18. Neurotypical people think they have to speak to people with disabilities like children. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and I'm almost 40. Still get treated like it from time to time. Story 19. Double D breasts are huge. The number is the band size, and the letter is the cup ratio to the band. An 8DD cup would not fit someone who wears a 16DD. Large breasts are those getting into K, L, and M. Story 20. Many of the ideas of the American left, such as tuition-free college, universal health care, and subsidized daycare, are considered radical. They are, in fact, the norm everywhere except here. Story 21. Childbirth doesn't start with a dramatic moment where water breaks from nowhere and immediate painful contractions. Most births start slowly, with contractions that are very manageable and that you can just get through while carrying on with your day before becoming more intense. Water usually doesn't break until later on. I hate the drama they create around this in the movies and on television. Story 22. Any of the misconceptions about autism. No, I am not a genius. Please do not treat me like a child. I pay my own taxes. And for the love of Christ, vaccines do not cause autism, and even if they did, autism is miles better than measles, hepatitis, and rabies. Story 23. The way colonialism is used in modern lexicon to describe every country conquered outside Europe, even if they were never a colony. A colony is when a country is conquered and settled by foreign people. For example, America was a British colony because they settled large numbers of people in lands they conquered from the Native Americans. India was conquered by the British, but it was never a colony because the British actively discouraged people from settling there. I know that this term is just the commonly used term to describe the era of European conquest, but it is still an incorrect use of the word. Story 24. The idea that Santos Dumont was actually the first in flight before the Wright brothers is less of a common misconception among the general public, being more common in Brazil specifically and among contrarians who like to think they are smarter than the general public. The Wright brothers were secretive while Santos Dumont did his flights publicly. This doesn't matter at all. During the 1900s, by which I mean 1900 to 1909, this was actually fairly significant, as the claims of the Wright brothers were often met with skepticism from authorities. But it is not 1906 anymore. It is 2024. Every claim the Wright brothers made is publicly available in the Library of Congress. You can see their patents, their documents, and their photographs. By 1910, this skepticism had mostly gone away, as the Wright brothers had proved their credentials to the organizations that had questioned them. The reason they didn't do it as publicly was that they didn't want as much publicity and were paranoid that a public flight would result in their ideas being stolen. But even with this, they did have dozens of eyewitnesses that they invited. The Wright brothers couldn't take off unassisted and used a catapult and rail. 1, that's not true. 2, that doesn't matter. Yes, Santos Dumont's plane used wheels instead of a rail. The Wright brothers did use a rail instead of wheels, but this wasn't because they couldn't take off unassisted. In fact, many of their flights were done unassisted without the rail. The reason they used the rail was that they just felt it was more advantageous than wheels, but they could do both. When they were trying to prove their flight to European flight authorities, they were asked to remove the rail as the standards required unassisted flight, and they did so and still set the record. Even in the modern day, lots of planes, such as Navy jets on aircraft carriers, use rails and catapults, but no one would claim they are less of a plane than Santos Dumont's. The Wright brothers just had a glorified glider, Santos Dumont's was more advanced. Wrong again. Yes, the Wright Flyer I was mostly a glider, but so was Santos Dumont's plane. It flew for 21 seconds and 771 feet. The Wright Flyer I flew 12 seconds and 120 feet the first time, but afterward, it flew 59 seconds and 859 feet. More importantly, the Wright Flyer 3 flew 39 minutes and 24.5 miles. Could also turn, which Santos Dumont's plane could not. The Wright brothers' planes were objectively more impressive. Even at the time, European officials were astounded at their planes, and by their first public flight in 1908, they didn't question their claims anymore. While the flight length and ability to take off unassisted were what officially won the Wright brothers their medal and recognition, it was the ability to turn that really impressed people. In 1909, they did a flight in Europe that was so impressive that even people like King Alfonso XIII of Spain, King Edward VII of England, King Victor Emmanuel III of Italy, and Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm of Germany went to see it. Santos Dumont also based some parts of his plane on things that the Wright brothers had done on theirs. Literally, the only thing the Wright brothers did worse than Santos Dumont was publicity, which, as I mentioned, was due to paranoia about getting their patent. The only reason their claim was initially met with skepticism was that they did everything quietly. Once they did do everything publicly, it became obvious that they were first. Santos Dumont is obviously a very important person in the history of aviation, and I greatly respect him. But the simple fact is that the Wright brothers were first, and their inventions were more significant to the early development of the airplane than anyone else. They invented the airplane, not just a glider but an actual airplane, and later planes were based on theirs. I will be a Wright brothers defender until the day I die. Story 25. The idea that you can make meaningful interpretations and conclusions about people based on how they move their body while talking, or even just how they talk. Human beings are far too complex for such simple nonsense to be remotely effective. Story 26. Wi-Fi is not the internet. Wi-Fi is wireless networking. It allows you to connect to a network that may or may not have wide area network access. There are plenty of Wi-Fi networks that are used for internal purposes only. Just because you have a strong Wi-Fi signal does not mean you have internet access or that it is working normally and fast. It means you are pretty close to a Wi-Fi antenna, are connected to it, and have a strong signal. Story 27. I am autistic. I am not going to start licking windows. When people find out I am autistic, the entire mood changes, and I am either treated like a child or looked at as if I take the short bus. Story 28. As a homosexual, I really hate when people say that the Bible does not denounce homosexuality, it only denounces pedophilia. That is a willful mistranslation that got picked up. It has probably done more good than bad in the world, but it very much grinds my gears. Story 29. That all men are the same. I am tired of being blamed for everything negative. It is never positive, of course. Men are lumped together for something one man did. Story 30. Too many people have no idea how nuclear weapons work. They just know that they are very destructive, which their mind turns into a totally destroys everything, without stopping to think that one nuclear weapon clearly does not destroy the entire planet. This means there will be areas that will be destroyed and areas that will not be destroyed. Somewhere in between, there must be areas that take some but not total destruction. That then leads to people standing on the top of a mountain to get it over with quickly, or assuming that they are completely sure to die when some person accidentally sends a false missile warning to the entire state of Hawaii. Duck and cover will not save you if you are at ground zero, but at some distance, a ditch or a single layer of drywall can be the difference between an avoidable, horrible, drawn-out, and painful death and walking away from it with some ear pain. This also applies to some extent when someone stores several kilotons worth of explosive fertilizer next to a pile of fireworks and some welding work. Story 31. When starships or spaceships in science fiction movies and shows are shown flying through asteroids so thick they have to dodge them, or through a nebula that's depicted as a thick cloud that obscures sensor data. Story 32. The stereotype that all black people are ghetto, only listen to rhythm and blues and rap, and are violent and racist is inaccurate. I'm a black female who enjoys Celtic, Scottish, bluegrass, and music from the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. I dislike ghetto behavior and small spiders scare me, so it's safe to say I'm anything but violent, and I love people of all races, including white people. I consider everyone I meet like family. Yet, racial misconceptions about those who are black continue constantly. Story 33. Abused children do not act or look a certain way. If they were easily identifiable at a glance, a lot of abuse cases would be uncovered much sooner. The same goes for the idea that it's a poor or rich people thing. It is not. Story 34. That rich people have hidden knowledge, with the exception of insider trading. Rich people are at best only marginally more intelligent than average. Mostly, they got lucky. Rich people suffer a huge survivorship bias. Story 35. That not everyone with Tourette's syndrome swears. In fact, it's a rare component of Tourette's. But it's known as the swearing disease despite the fact it only affects a specific small percentage of the population with Tourette's.